30-second commercial. Criticism has become not just a response to art, but in many ways it's become a mediator of it. We live in an age where we often encounter our work secondhand. It's filtered through someone else's perception before we even ever come face to face with it ourselves. It's an age of review scores, hot takes, detailed dissections, and rapid-fire reactions. And in this media ecosystem, we need to ask ourselves, is media criticism actually useful? Does it serve us, or have we begun to serve it? My answer isn't simple, and it's also not dismissive. No, I don't believe that media criticism is useless per se. I believe it has a purpose, sometimes even a noble one. But I also believe we've allowed it way too much power. More power probably than any external voice should ever wield over something as intimate and as subjective as experience. The danger, as I see it, isn't in the existence of criticism, but in our surrender to it, our tendency to outsource our instincts and to trade our unmediated perceptions for borrowed conclusions. But let's consider what criticism can do at its best. Good, honest, thoughtful criticism. It doesn't tell us what to think, but it can help us think more clearly. It can articulate truths we feel but maybe can't quite express. It can shine a light on technique, context, and symbolism that we may otherwise miss. A great critic may serve as a kind of cartographer, mapping the contours of a work in a way that invites us to explore further as opposed to staying confined to the map itself. Now, in this form, criticism can deepen our understanding. It can elevate our conversations. It can even elevate the art itself by pushing creators and audiences to engage more deeply possible if our relationship to criticism is uncritical. If we treat it as gospel as opposed to one voice in a larger conversation, we risk allowing criticism to become its own form of dogma. And dogma, by its nature, resists curiosity. Now, there's a deeper question underneath all this. Why are we so quick to trust someone else's voice over our own? Why are we uncomfortable sitting with our own impressions or our own confusion? Part of the answer, I expect, lies in our cultural relationship to authority. We're trained from a young age to believe in experts, to defer to those who seem to know more. And indeed, in many areas of life, this is both wise and necessary. But when it comes to something as personal, as subjective, as fundamentally emotional as the experience of art, we need to remember that expertise isn't the same as truth. A critic may have studied film theory. They may write with elegance, passion, and great insight, but they can't, and they shouldn't, replace the individual's encounter with the work itself. In a healthy media culture, criticism enriches experience without overshadowing it. It offers interpretations, not verdicts. It encourages dialogue as opposed to consensus. But in a hyper-mediated culture where everything is reviewed, scored, and memed before the credits have even rolled, we risk becoming spectators of our own taste. We perform opinions instead of forming them. We choose sides in cultural debates we haven't fully understood. We praise and condemn not from the heart, but from the algorithm. There is a path forward, but it requires a shift in how we approach criticism. Not as a compass, but as a conversation. It requires us to protect that fragile space of first impressions, to be willing to say, I don't know what I think yet, and let that uncertainty breathe. It requires us to recognize that the experience of art is, at its core, a dialogue between maker and audience. And that dialogue is most meaningful when it begins with our own voice, not someone else's. I'm not advocating for the end of criticism. Far from it. I believe in the power of dialogue. I believe in the value of reflection, contextual understanding, and rigorous engagement. But I also believe that the most meaningful part of encountering art lies not in the verdict, but in the experience itself. The moment of sitting before a canvas, or watching a scene unfold, or hearing a phrase in a song that lodges itself in your memory. We can't let those moments be colonized before we've even lived them. We can't become passive consumers